Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast, Perspective with a K as I'm German. I'm Nele von Horsten, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF and lots of other information. And now the show begins. Welcome to episode number 101, Shared Decision Making and AI, Making the Best Decisions for MS together with Dr. Sven Jungmann. Dr. Sven Jungmann is physician, managing director, company founder, author, consultant and speaker. And now enjoy the interview. Hello, Sven. It's such a pleasure to have you again on the show, this time on the English one.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And before we actually start, it would be lovely if you could introduce yourself to the audience so they know who is with me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I'm a medical doctor originally, and I worked in hospitals for a little while, largely internal medicine, and worked in oncology also and the emergency room. And I loved it. But I ended up doing a lot of other things outside, largely in digital health innovation, working with established companies who want to do something new, from Audi to Roche, but also created my own startups. I am an angel investor and I advise professional investors sort of in their investment strategy and help their companies and so on. So I moved away from the bedside to work more on innovation and health.
That's great. We need people like you. So maybe what was your personal motivation to do that move to go into the innovation field?
I mean, honestly, there was a lot of personal frustration with how the healthcare system works. I think if you study medicine, there's a high chance that you do that because you're looking for purpose and you want to do good for people. And the interactions with patients are irreplaceable. That's really, really cool. But everything around it is so frustrating. So it can be that for 1 hour of meaningful patient interaction, you have to do 6 hours of really annoying work that could be automated or given to somebody else. And it's not that I don't mind doing basic things, but if the patients are asking, when is the doctor finally coming? And the answer is, the doctor's trying to find printer paper because he can't get a fax, then it should just raise a lot of questions. And that's just deeply frustrating. So that put me out. I wanted to create a system where I felt I wanted to help design a system that even I would want to go back and work in. But honestly, I think it will never happen because I discovered how much more I love this world outside. It's much more creative. It's much more interdisciplinary. So most of the doctors and nurses, even if we have different specialties, the basic way of structuring your thinking, socialization, so on is very similar. And now I work with data scientists and designers and business people and so on. And it's just much more stimulating, I find, and much more fun to create things where there's nothing. So I think that's what's going to keep me out.
And you still are in contact with patient advocates like me, so you still have some patients around, and you have the summarized voice. So in a way, it's good, I guess.
I think if you leave like I did, it's really important to stay very, very humble on a deep level, and I'm never going to go around and claim that sort of I'm a great clinician, because you just lose it after a while for sure. But I like to think that I'm good at listening and really trying to understand people's problems, and then the medical knowledge I have is extremely helpful for that. But yeah, my main job is in listening to people like you and your audience.
Yeah, great. So, as we are here with the MS community, which app and digital solutions for people with MS do you find particularly helpful and why? Or is it more on a broader view?
Yes. So I think this question has become so much more interesting in the last 6 to 12 months than before. So I think because we're seeing a paradigm shift, right? And you have all of these great MS apps, which are really focused on, solving individual problems. So I'm sure you're aware of them. There's sort of things that are like My MS Manager, Floodlight, and so on. What I'm hearing is that people are quite happy with them. You also have things where it's more in general about lifestyle energy management. I don't know, Pace My Day and things like that. You have medication reminders such as MediSafe, which can be nice. And then there are communities, Belong MS, and so on. And they all serve different types of needs specific to people with MS. I think that's great. I think a lot of other solutions that are just generally there to promote health are also meaningful. From, I don't know, nutrition apps. I'm using Lose It. I have a Whoop band for my workouts and so on. You have to see whatever, fits you as well. But I think even going beyond sort of the very focused MS apps, there's a suite of things you can do to make your lives better. However, I think there's a paradigm shift happening right now. And I just have more and more of these conversations. People are just starting to realize it. I might be wrong about this. But what we're seeing is with these new AI technologies, it's become so much easier to build something. Building is not the challenge anymore. It's figuring out what to build and getting it to the people and so on. I have a team with one physicist who's been doing machine learning for 10 years, and I have one full stack software developer. And I keep asking them, are you sure you don't want a bigger team? And they tell me, no, it's annoying. We have to interface with more humans. We just want to build things, and we can use all of this AI to do what previously a team of 6 to 7 people would do. So it's become much cheaper to create something. And with these AI tools, they can adjust themselves much better to an individual situation. Like a software is more hard-coded previously, where you give certain features and then this happens and this happens. And the AI can really adjust itself to your needs. And so I think what we will be seeing is a lot of the traditional apps, they will probably die, and they will be replaced by solutions that are much more comprehensive, that don't just try to only solve your MS. They try to help you understand you as a whole being, with maybe also other diseases you may have, with your family obligations and so on, and just be like your personal companion for who you are, and not reduce you basically to one disease, which is only a small part of your life.
Makes totally sense. Yes. So how can the digital health solutions help you make every day easier? When you have MS, when you have diabetes, when you have a couple of these things, maybe all together.
Make your life easier with, like, do you mean as a patient or? No?
Yes, sorry, from the patient view. Yes. How can these apps, how can these digital health solutions make our life easier as patients?
So, I know you have an international audience, but I'm pretty sure that most of the people, no matter where they're from, will be fairly frustrated with their healthcare system, because you go to the doctor, they have minimal time. There are so many more things you would like to discuss. There are also the things that you think you don't know that you should be discussing, and nobody's telling you about it. Maybe you meet another patient who tells you, oh, there's also this and this. And you're like, why did nobody ever told me this? And then the things that you get, maybe a new medication or they're adjusting something, things go so fast that it's often really hard to, I think very few patients, if they leave a doctor's practice and they would have to explain to somebody else what just happened and why, most of them, would be able to recount maybe 15% of what happened. And I think that's a real problem. And so a lot of the things, that's another mindset shift that I've been trying to push for a while, and I'm seeing it now slowly. So we had this big era where app developers were so focused, and they were really proud about that. They would say, we are radically patient focused. This is what we do. And it sounds great. Of course, everybody wants the patient to have the best outcome, but that doesn't mean that you should be patient focused. And what I mean by that is, what I think what happened is founders and innovators in the healthcare space, they were listening to what is happening in other industries. And one industry that was always quite advanced with software was e-commerce, and especially Amazon. And so Amazon really has this signal where they say, we are radically customer focused. And so then I think what happened is that people in healthcare said, oh, radically customer, that's great. So who's the customer in healthcare? It must be the patient. So let's just replicate that and replace customer with patient. The problem is, in e-commerce, you have to buy a t-shirt online. And then your question is, what size do you need? What color do you like? And maybe a few more things. It's not that complicated. In medicine, you have very heavy science-based discussions. You have big decisions to make, which really influence your life. And you don't have a reference. It's easy for you to judge a pizza because you've eaten hundreds of thousands different ones. So it's easy. It's hard for you to judge a treatment if it's the first time in your life that you're exposed to that. And so trust is more important. And no more complex or chronic or heavy disease happens in a vacuum. You're always surrounded. You have your family, you have friends, you have caregivers, you have doctors, nurses, therapists, and so on. And they're all there to try and help you. So if you build a solution that's only radically patient-centered and you ignore all the rest, I don't think it's going to really be helpful. It's trying to find a shortcut. And I think they can really help you if they make it easier for you to interact with these different people. So prepare a meeting with the doctor. These are the most likely questions you are going to get. Make sure you have the right answers and you're not forgetful. These are the questions you may want to ask. Think about those. Or maybe write down the ones that you also wanted to ask. And so help a person to really be well prepared for all of these interactions and re-energize sort of this human interaction in healthcare. That's where I think is the biggest lever in terms of truly empowering patients, of truly making them feel like they understand what's going on, and of making best use of the resources that we have, right? Because people are better prepared. Data aggregation is key. Like when I worked in the hospital, sometimes you have patients, they bring in a bag, like a grocery bag,
Yes.
and they dump it, and it's just full of medicines. And they say, now you know what I have. It's kind of like, show me your medication and I tell you what you have. And then I'm like, okay, but why are you taking this? Oh, no, I'm not taking this anymore. Okay, why is it in there? And so then you have this whole guesswork. And then you have other patients, they bring you this big folder and they say, now you can study me. And it starts with, they were preterm born 45 years ago
Yeah.
and had a little bit of an allergy at age 3, which they don't really know what it was. And they're like, but we're in an emergency room. I have people that I need to bring to the intensive care unit. Why am I supposed to read all of this? I can't. And so also helping doctors to get like the right information, well-structured, digestible, comprehensive, I think is going to be a massive game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, if we become human-centric, then it's more fun for doctors and therapists and nurses to stay in the field, because I think for them, as you just said at the beginning, it's quite frustrating, and people are going into that field because they want to help people, and it's really hard at the moment.
And I mean, we have to be honest, right? I think the obvious problem that everybody hears about is it's hard to get a doctor's appointment, and many people don't want to choose the profession anymore, and many people are actively trying to leave. I get contacted every week by doctors from all over who asking me like, please help me get out. I could turn that into a business for sure. But the other problem, which is not discussed so much, is the big mental health toll on healthcare professionals. The amount of depression, burnout, even like substance abuse is pretty significant. And you often can't really talk about it internally and so on. And then the question is, who do you want to be treated by? Somebody who is taking care of themselves and feels healthy and is fresh and so on, or somebody who's, burning inside and struggling. And there are pockets where people are really paying attention to that, but by and large, it's underaddressed, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I have quite some doctors in my family, and yes, luckily they stay mentally healthy, but that's because they are really taking care of themselves, and it's not because it's easy. You mentioned it's, of course, great if you can prepare yourself for the appointments, because that is really precious time. In your opinion, what criteria are important for evaluating which digital health solutions to use for that?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good one, I think. I would probably start by seeing if your doctor has any recommendations. So if you have a doctor who is thinking more holistically in terms of the treatments, they would also spend time looking at apps and also the science behind them. And more importantly, if they have already experienced prescribing it to people, they will also have received feedback from other patients and then have that they can share with you. And And so then they can tell you, if you like to travel a lot, people prefer this. If you have children, this is quite nice because it also has this feature and so on. So things that you might not be aware of, because they can just share the experience of fellow patients. And you could also ask fellow patients yourself, right? Why not? The other thing that I would look for is, what is the science behind it? So one easy thing to just try is you go on PubMed, and you type in the name of the app and you see what happens. Like, are there a lot of publications? Is there little? You might not be trained to read scientific publications, but it doesn't matter. You can just basically look at the abstract, and there's a conclusion, and the conclusion is just a few sentences where they would say something around, what have they found, and that's typically easy to understand. If you still struggle, you can put it in ChatGPT or whatever you want, and then just say, I'm a patient with MS. I'm looking into using certain apps. I found this one and I looked at the scientific literature, and then you just copy the literature in there, and then you can just say, would you recommend it to me, or what should I consider if I'm looking in this app? And it just draws from this and translates it for you. I think that's a really nice way of going about it. And then there are some hygiene standards, right? So if it's a medical device, if it has like some more clinical functionalities, then it is a regulated product. And in Europe, it would have to have the CE mark. In the US, it would need to be FDA approved. And they would need to be able to show you evidence of that. So typically, when that's there, it already means that it has been vetted and there's a quality process behind it that is designed to make the thing safe to use, just like any other medical product. And so that can be quite useful. And then, finally, I believe just trying things out and just seeing if it works for you and how it feels, and getting a bit creative and getting into this habit of, I'm just going to try to use tools in general, and see how they can help me, even if it's just a Gemini, ChatGPT or whatever, and just see what happens.
Yeah, sounds good. And what do you recommend to people who want to involve their doctors in the use of digital health, where the doctors are not yet using these solutions?
Yeah. So a bit of a harsh view. I think if you have a doctor who's just generally reluctant, I would question that doctor. They might be fantastic in their field, but as a doctor, you kind of always have, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. You have to have a curiosity about new treatments and what's going on. You have to be on top of the literature in your field. It's really hard to do that because there's so much happening, but you have to be on top. And you also have to constantly, you kind of have to obsess with trying to find the latest and best treatments for your patients. And then you can still say, no, I don't want it because, there's this and this risk, or I want to wait a little bit until I have more data. That's okay. But if somebody is generally opposed to like something new that is a legitimate treatment, I would see it as a red flag in the person. Now, if somebody is maybe also getting acquainted to it, they're generally a great doctor, you like them, you've been working with them a long time, then I would actually have the conversation of, what would be helpful for you, right? I look at these two apps. They have these different features. Do you think that this would make your work easier also? And to give you an example, so there are some startups that try to get like all of this really complex long-term data, and then patients go to their doctors and show that to them, and they're like, there is no guideline or there's no science base that helps me make sense of this data that you're providing me with, because it's not aligned with how medicine works. And they came up with their own like metrics or whatever, but I can't use it, right? And so then it's not useful for them. But for example, my Whoop band or the Apple Watch, they have outputs specifically designed for doctors in a way that they can actually use it. And it's not just about understanding, right? If you're a doctor, you usually have guidelines for all sorts of things. And the guidelines, they tell you this is how you treat X, Y, Z. And you can deviate from them, but you have to justify why you do that with the individual case of the patient. Otherwise, if you make a mistake and you're not doing it according to the guideline, and it goes to court, you have a problem because you were deviating from the guideline. So the guideline protects you legally also. Now, if you suddenly treat somebody differently on the basis of data that's not validated in the guidelines, you are in a legal gray zone, right? And I think good apps are also trying to make doctors' lives easier. If you can have a conversation with them on, how would you use this and how can I make your life easier? I think that's where you're getting somewhere where it's like becoming teamwork in a way.
Yes, and teamwork is great. It should be a shared decision making using the potential and the benefits of both sides. So knowing yourself and what your goals are, but also all the knowledge the doctor has. Which specific AI applications do you consider particularly useful for decision making in MS treatment or in treatment in general?
That's a very good question. It feels like every week I will be giving you a different answer at the moment because things are moving so fast. Generally, you have these big models that are basically trained on the whole knowledge of the world, everything that's in the internet and openly accessible, they have been trained on. These models are showing to perform extremely well on medical questions as well. In like standardized tests and so on, much better than doctors in many ways. Maybe not as every doctor, but sort of the average. And that means you could try most of those. You have to be careful because they can hallucinate, which means they give you an answer which sounds super convincing, but it's just made up on the spot. They can be trained on biased data sets. So if you belong to a minority group, there's a chance that it's more likely to give you a response that's adequate for white men from high-income countries, just because that's where most of the data comes from. People are really working on that, on addressing that. So this is getting much better. But just saying, like, have a general mistrust, as you should have anyway, even if you talk to humans, in the output you get. But it is really, really good. And then you have this camp that says, I don't want medical data or medical AI to work based on the whole internet, because it could be that it's also been trained on a lot of like false science and rubbish, and so there are people who are training AI specifically on medically validated data as the ground truth, and that seems to be showing better results for now because there's less noise in the training and it's more curated, and you kind of have better explainability on how it comes to a decision. So that is still a race. But if I talk to my AI friends, most of them, like the engineers, they're not too convinced that this approach of going niche will be the winning the race in the mid to long term.
Yeah.
I think the jury is out, and we have to see. But if you wanted to look into one solution that is very specific to healthcare, which I really, really enjoy, it's called glass.health, glass like window glass or like a glass of water, .health. It's made for doctors, but I think you can just try it out anyway. And what's cool is you just type in your symptoms and everything you know about your health, as much as you have. What you don't have, That's fine. And then it gives you a proper medical report, just like if a doctor would write it with, okay, these are the main symptoms. This information is lacking that would be relevant to know. These are the most likely diagnoses. These are other diagnoses that could also be, but are not so likely. And then what I love is they call it the can't miss diagnoses. These are the 3 things you absolutely cannot miss. And that, from a patient safety perspective, I think is phenomenal because these things do get missed, right? And then it also tells you these are the next type of tests you should be doing. This could be an initial treatment and so on. It really gives you like a plan. And normally when I was writing these things, it took me an hour and a half, and then I had to do some more research. I did it in the evening when I was already exhausted and not super mentally fit and so on. And here you just dump it in and it's there within 5 seconds. It's crazy good.
That sounds really good. And I think especially when people live maybe far away from university hospitals and don't have access to, or don't have direct access to let's say, really smart teams of doctors and have uncertain problems. Yes, sounds really great.
That's an excellent point you're making, Nele. rare diseases are also a big topic. And the problem is rare diseases are actually really common because in an individual rare disease, it doesn't happen that often. But there are so many different rare diseases that if you walk through a street, chances are you ran past at least 2 or 3 people with a rare disease, and they might not even know. And the problem with rare diseases is that most doctors fail to see them because you can only see what you know. And getting to that is difficult. And AI is superb with pattern recognition and also with spotting these things. And I've had this situation with my dad, who's a psychiatrist, neurologist, and he had a patient who was also a very senior doctor. So between the both of them, I think it's like 60 years of work experience in medicine. And his patient, the doctor, had some really odd symptoms, like changing behavior and like things that are really difficult to grasp. And none of the tests, MRI, EEG, none of them had anything pathological. It looked all normal, but clearly the person had an issue. And at some point, my dad said, I asked 3 different specialists. The guy doesn't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm like, let's put it in glass. And we found it came up with 2 other diagnoses where we both looked at it. And of course, I also didn't think of it, right? Where we both looked at it and we were like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. And it wasn't obvious, of course. But when you saw it, you were like, and so I don't know what the result was in the end, but we ended up writing like, also with ChatGPT, we anonymized everything, but we ended up writing these things out, sent it to a couple of specialists for further workup. And I would love to hear what came out in the end, but we would not have gotten there without these.
Yeah. That's great. And that's really, really helpful and hopefully changes the life of many people to the positive. So that's the topic of human healthcare. How can AI specifically contribute to a more human healthcare?
Question. The question is so important because the knee-jerk reaction of most, especially senior doctors, is they think these things are juxtaposed. So either you have a human, valuable, high-touch experience, or you have digital and AI. And I've been challenged publicly by like a senior doctor, for example, who said like, so what do you want? Personalized human care or automation and digital? And I'm like, you fundamentally don't understand what's happening. Because I think without it is thanks to digital and AI that we will get to a truly human healthcare system. The number one most obvious reason for that is if AI and digital can take away all the non-patient related work from me, I will just literally have 3, 4, 5 more hours per day that I can spend with the people. If I don't have to get a fax anymore and then dictate or type it off, that already is 1.5 hours to 2 hours per day saved that I can allocate somewhere else. If I don't have to like ask a million questions to even understand what problem my patient has, because I have everything already outlined and maybe they have answered it beforehand, that's even better. So now I can just within like 2 minutes get the full picture of somebody in a way that previously would, if I had the time, would cost me 1 hour to even have a chance to get. So that's for starters. And then more importantly, guidelines today are really, really slow. So we mentioned guidelines earlier. Basically what happens is you have a group of experts that are sitting together and every 4 or 5 years, they are reviewing the whole knowledge that is relevant to a certain treatment, let's say multiple sclerosis. And then they're giving recommendations based on the science of, what you should be giving and not, and what should come first and what should come second and how many screenings and no. And these are really important things to do, but it's too slow. Like there are so many guidelines. If you go on the German guideline list on AWMF, what it's called, there will be a lot of guidelines where there's this watermark which says outdated, but there's nothing new. And you're like, what do you want me to do? And people anyway don't fully follow the guidelines because there's so much new science already that they can't ignore. So it makes it absurd. And now if you have an AI that is able to do that properly, it could basically give you updates on guidelines on a monthly, daily, weekly basis, whatever you wanted. maybe we don't even need guidelines anymore because we just ask what's the best for this patient. And so that's really important. And I think secondly, what's really important is we're moving away from like purely medically correct decisions, which is Nele is a woman with MS, with I don't know, these and these lab values, and so on, so on, so on. This medication worked well, this she didn't like, and so on. And now for these and these reasons, I'm giving her this medication. That's a medically well done treatment potentially, but it might not fit you because maybe where you have a trip planned and it's hard for you to get the medicine in that country, or because you're a mother, you also have some other constraints that are important for you, which are currently not considered. I had a patient who had a lung cancer, first diagnosed, super intelligent man. And he even had a metastasis. So it was clear that his life was very limited at that time. And there were high chances of heavy complications. And then we asked him to basically do a chemotherapy. And he said, I will do everything you want. However, I have a marathon coming up. And he was in Berlin. I have a marathon coming up in Hawaii in 1 month. And I really want to do that. And we said, a marathon with a metastasized lung cancer, we don't even know if you can make the flight. Like, what happens if you have to do an emergency landing across the Atlantic? And he said, yeah, help me figure it out. That's why you're doctors. And he was so obsessed with that. He said, I'm doing this with my daughter. We all know it's probably the last thing I'll be doing in my life. This is not negotiable. Afterwards, I do whatever you want. And so we were bending backwards to make this happen, and it worked. And he did his marathon, and he was the happiest man. And he came back, and everything was fine. But we had no clue how to do this. This was the first time in our lives. And with an AI, you can be much, much, much better and faster at understanding people's personal preferences. He was really vocal about it. Many patients are not, right? They're just like, oh, whatever, I'm just going to do what you tell me. And I think that's where I'm getting most passionate about is when we now start to really diagnose for preferences and treat also for personal preferences and not just what's medically correct. And that would never scale without digital and AI. And that's for me what is sort of a truly human focused medicine and not just, what we have today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's really shared decision making as well. Yes. Because if I would have a cancer that will end up my life, I would like to see some nice places around the world. And I would put the same pressure on my doctor and say, whatever it takes, but I want to see first, I don't know, Machu Picchu and the pyramids and I don't know, some nice places with my family. My life will end up anyhow, so let me do some fun stuff up front and let me create some more nice memories for my family.
Well,
so they can keep on.
Yeah. I mean, this man taught me so much with this that I didn't realize at the time.
Yeah.
And you just basically say the same thing, and I just wholeheartedly agree.
Absolutely. So how do you think the role of the medical personnel will change in a digitalized healthcare system that uses AI?
Most hate to hear it. They will have to change a lot. I'm pretty sure. There's a big so ironically, in medicine, you also have to study psychology. And one thing that they teach you is the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. So when you get a bad message, you go through different stages. It's not linear and you might go through the same stage twice and so on. But basically, there are these different ways of processing it. And then one is denial, which is, I'm not sick. Everything's fine. The other one is anger, is getting aggressive at, I don't know, the doctor or the world or God. Then there's the stage of negotiation. And finally, you come to peace with it. And it seems to me that a big part of the medical world is still in denial or in anger. And I get hired a lot to give talks, keynotes. And often when I talk to doctors, the person who hires me tells me, but don't tell them that it's gonna change how they work. They're not going to like that. They want to have a good time. And I'm like, I don't know if I want that. But I think the reality is, as a doctor, until now, your key job was to memorize a lot of stuff and be able to apply it under heavy pressure and exhaustion in the correct manner to take the right decisions. And you spend your summers and your weekends and so on, when other people in their 20s are having a great time, you're sitting in the library with poor air conditioning and you're memorizing every single artery and vein and whatnot from early to late. And that is not that useful anymore, because a computer can do that much, much better. And it's still nice to have that knowledge. It's nice to train your brain in that way, but it's not what's going to make you stand out in the future. In the future, I think it's going to be much more how tech savvy are you? How good are you with using tech? You don't need to be a programmer. I think programming is also over soon, because computers don't need you to program them anymore. You just tell them what they want to do, and they don't need a programming language because they're machines. So that's I think that's going to end. Not now, but soon. But you need to be really good at, I think, statistics, at understanding the data and how things are being trained. You need to be really good at collecting information, which can also mean listening to patients properly, and not just to the words, also to the body language, also to the person sitting next to them, also to everything else. Like in telemedicine, I spend time looking at the background, for example. So, with you, I see that there's Japan, there's a ton of books, and they're quite different. There's also art in it. That tells me a lot about you as a person, right? And every room is different. So I'm using that also to adjust my language, to kind of get an idea of, what matters to you and all of this. And I could go on. Like we have to smell. So many patients lie to you about their smoking. They will tell you, no, I stopped smoking like a year ago. And then you smell on the documents that they brought and you realize, surely you haven't. Like you've been actively smoking a lot. And so on. And this is something where machines are not so good yet, at least. So that's something where we excel. And it would actually be whatever people always thought doctors should be, right? The good, trusted companions who listen, who are there, who are present. A lot of the physical work that we need to do, including surgeries and so on, I think that will take a while to get automated away. But I'm quite confident that many, many, many things where doctors today say, oh, no, this can only be done by human, they're going to be very wrong. They will be protected a bit for liability reasons, because as a medtech company, you prefer that the doctor is liable in the end than you if something goes wrong. So they have to be in the loop. In the future, I mean, now they still have to be in the loop because they actually really need it. Yeah. I might be very wrong about the prediction. I'm sort of more and more, I feel like machines can take over big parts of what we think is chiefly human.
Yeah, we'll see. Will become interesting. And I think like it was always important to be adaptive. Be adaptive and use the benefits of the things that are new around the corner and make the most out of it. And then you will stay valuable.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, yes, you wanted
No, I think you pointed it out so nicely. The key question is, I think, always, how can I be of value to others? If you have a good answer for that, I think you will be fine. I feel like a lot of doctors, often they just ask themselves, how can I maintain my life? How do I not have to change? How can I stay in my comfortable role that I built out for myself? And I get it, because they worked hard to get there. But that's the wrong question to ask. It's not about you. Nobody cares about you. People care about themselves. And your job as a doctor, that's what we always subscribe to, is to do something good for the community, for patients, for others. So now they have to really prove it in a very much different way, because they will have to reinvent themselves and refocus on what value they bring to others. So yeah, just wanted to highlight what you just said.
Thank you. Okay. So we are more or less at the end of our session. We are coming to the quickfire Q&A. Complete the sentence. For me, multiple sclerosis is?
I think a disease that has a lot of hope. There are some extremely credible people who are making a case that within our lifetime, we might be able to give it a cure. And I can really imagine that this is going to happen.
Yeah, and that would be so lovely. What breakthrough in the digitalization of the healthcare system do you hope to see in the next 3 years?
I think many of the things that would be very transformative are pretty basic. And it's about aggregating data, making it digestible to different people, making it accessible, shareable, and making it quality assured. A lot of that stuff is already common in many other places. And it should be adopted in healthcare now too. It sounds crazy, but that would be a breakthrough. It's just also trying to keep it simple, go to the basics, get those things right, and that would be massively transformative. But we're making it too complicated often.
Yeah, absolutely. And the episode before, I was talking to Tjalf Thiemsen, my neurologist, who is quite innovative, about the digital twin. And yes, it's not so easy to establish the digital twin, but it would be so lovely to have all these high quality raw data, not getting everything, but getting important raw data, and then using algorithms, using AI, using technology to read that data and really have individualized treatment for patients and, of course, recommendations what to do in normal lifestyle. I don't know how to work out, what to do, things. That would be so lovely. Yeah. Which website can you recommend on the topic of digitalization and the use of AI in the healthcare system?
Yeah. So I really like the New England Journal of Medicine, personally, which is a strong resource for doctors primarily. And they have a subset for AI. So it's ai.nejm.com or org. But I think if people are interested in AI, I would look beyond healthcare, because things are happening too fast. Healthcare is pretty slow, and it's very easy to understand how things could be applied to healthcare. So I would recommend a newsletter service called TLDR, which stands for Too Long Didn't Read, .ai. And there you have different things like for founders, for marketing and so on. You can ignore those. But I would click on the one for AI. And then I think even every day or every other day, you get a newsletter with what's going on. And it also includes healthcare things, but it goes beyond. And if you only read that, I think you're pretty good.
Sounds good. Finally, what message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with people living with MS?
So going back to what I said earlier, I believe that we have real hope that it might be over at some point with MS. And in the meantime, I think try to use as many of these technologies as you can or you feel comfortable with. Try to experiment. It's very good to become fluent in that and to make it a habit, and also to keep abreast, because next week something might happen that changes everything. And then the week thereafter again, if the innovation speed is so breakneck fast that the only way of really staying abreast is by immersing yourself into it, so that you have a chance of making use of the latest advances in the field to manage yourself better. And sometimes it's even small things. I don't know, managing your travel better, stuff like that. And sometimes it's the big things, like a new treatment or clinical study that you could take part in and so on.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. So, Sven, where can people follow you and everything you do online?
Thanks. So I'm mostly using LinkedIn to communicate and to share things. So very, very, very happy to connect. I'm also soon going to be building out a bit more on YouTube, because I think we talked about that beforehand, right? It's one of the mediums where you have more of an idea how authentic it is, with getting really hard. And that is the one thing where you really experience the person. So I'm building that out more. I've been trying out a little bit. I'm not quite happy yet, but getting there. And any wishes that somebody has that I should be talking about, I can do it, and I will respond with a video for sure.
Fantastic. Sven, it was a pleasure again. Thank you very much. And looking forward to meet you at one of, an upcoming event.
Yes, me too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the interview, learned something new, or actually probably a lot new, and are willing to try out on your own how AI can improve your journey with MS. And of course, other diseases, or maybe diseases or health issues your beloved one have. Because it's really, if you are getting into this topic and if you know how to use AI solutions to prepare for your interviews, to get an overview of your health record, then I think this is something you can use for everything in your health data, and of course also for your beloved ones, as just said. By the way, next time there will be another very important issue, not a fun one, but very important one. It will be about MS and domestic abuse. Raising awareness, offering support, creating change with Sue Britt. Susan Britt is a midwife, a postgraduate researcher at the University of Nottingham, a PhD student focusing on healthcare professional views and experiences of responding to domestic abuse in people living with MS for the MS Domestic Violence and Abuse Research Initiative in the United Kingdom. And of course, everything you are learning there will help you no matter where you are living, if you are living in the UK, in Germany, or in any other country. So please tune in again and stay as healthy and positive as possible. And see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. See you next time.